Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your lead analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by Mr. Ross Binder, managing editor for us at Hawkeye Beacon. Before we get started, make sure that you drop that like and comment here on YouTube, subscribe wherever you're listening, leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We really appreciate it, and it helps us out a lot. So please go ahead and do that. First things first today on the pod, we actually have some hard news. Ross and I have been off the mic for a little while because it's been a whole lot of nothing, but some hard news today to start with. Emely Rodriguez, transfer guard slash forward, 6-footer from UCF, officially signed with Iowa this morning. We heard some rumblings of it over the weekend, but now it is official. She averaged 11.9 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.4 assists and steals, and shot 42% from 2-point range as well as 33% from the field last season for the Knights. What's the UCF mascot? Golden Knights? Black
Gold,
Knights?
yeah, let's go with Golden Knights.
Okay. I'll look it up while
Definitely,
you're talking. How's that? Something
def
nice.
they're definitely knights of some
Yeah.
sort. Yeah.
But anyway, Ross, you got together the majority of the content for us. Of course, Braden does an excellent job with our transfer profiles, and you'll have three thoughts later tonight. But
That's
just
right.
initial reactions. I guess we're posting this tomorrow morning, so three thoughts will be up. That'll be in the description
Right.
for folks
Right.
to for folks to read, premium subscribers to read. But just initial thoughts on Rodriguez and what this means for Iowa.
I think it's a nice addition. It's kind of what people have been wanting to see from Iowa in terms of the portal and adding some more talent because I think she does check a lot of boxes that Iowa um, didn't have coming back on the roster for next year or wasn't adding through the recruiting class that's coming in necessarily. And by that I mean she adds some size. She's 6 foot, so she's not like, post player big, but she adds some nice size like to the wing position generally. She had some really good athleticism and quickness that I don't think is really well represented among the players Iowa had on the roster for next season already. So, she's a player that is good in transition. She's able to, break down, defenders with the dribble, get into the lane, attack the bucket. And, those are skills that I think are going to be really helpful for Iowa and something that can just add some new dimensions to Iowa's offense in terms of, freeing up some shooters, taking some of the pressure off of Hannah and Ava in the post. So yeah, I think she's not the splashiest addition for sure, but she was a really solid player for UCF last year, and I think she's going to fit in well with what Iowa wants to do. We know, I mean, Iowa's been super um, very thorough, in their assessments of players in the portal. I think that started with Bluter, it's continued with Jensen. Like they're not a team that's looking to add, just wholesale, rebuild teams through the portal, for better or worse. That's not the team building approach that this program is taking. They're looking to really build through development and recruitment and from high school, and then also like supplementing that through the portal. And so they're really careful about, making sure the fit is right. Both I think in terms of like team chemistry, that's a big one, and then also like obviously the on-court fit, and what she can do with the ball on the court and everything. So I think for all those factors, like it seems like she should be a really solid fit for what Iowa can use next year.
First thing I notice in looking at her stats, more than 10 points a game. You're getting a double digit score. You're getting 5 rebounds. And, you throw in a steal. She looks like she's probably a solid defensive player that immediately
Mhm.
helps you out on the wing, guarding opposing teams' best scorers
Yep.
at that position. Do you see her more as a 3-4, a 2-3-4, like strictly a three? Where do you think she fills in?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to be really interesting, I think, to see where Iowa uses her next year. From what I've been, looking at her tape and just kind of trying to figure out where she could fit with this roster, I think she's probably kind of mostly in that 3-4 range. I think she's going to be on the wing. She could play the four, I think, in some lineups if you needed her to. But I think ideally you want her on that three spot, kind of on in that wing position. Uh, kind of where Iowa played. Well, I was going to say a Folter, Sydney Affolter. Iowa played a Folter at the four.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, right. We're going to talk about this in just a second. But Iowa ended up playing a Folter a lot at the four last year. But that was kind of out of necessity because they just couldn't make the Stolke O'Grady, combination work down low. The goal for next season has to be to you have to find a way to get Ava Hayden and Hannah Stolke on the floor together as much as possible. Because they're going to be two of your best players, two of your best offensive threats, should be two good rebounders. Like it's not going to be good team building if you have to, only play one of them at a time, essentially. And if you do that, then for sure, I don't think Rodriguez would play anywhere other than the three with maybe a few minutes at the two. So that's that's the way I see it, is that I think if the Hayden, Stokey thing just isn't going to work, you end up kind of like this past year where Stokey's playing at the five and Hayden's coming into Speller and et cetera. Like then yeah, I think Rodriguez would end up getting some minutes at the four in that scenario. But you really don't want that to happen, I think, because that's not how Iowa's gonna put its best team on the court next year, in my opinion. That's not gonna be working out the way you want it to.
If you're playing, additionally, if you're playing Rodriguez at the two, you've got a big lineup out there too. So,
Yes.
so the 3-4 would make more sense, um, given the roster construction, and of course, like you mentioned, they're probably in a better situation with having Stolke and Hayden on the floor at the same time. And we saw that work last year. So you
Yep.
have to think that, Jan is kind of licking her chops trying to get more of that and figure it out, to play it more consistently this year. Do you think Rodriguez is a starter?
That's a great question too, because plug, I wrote about the Iowa projected rotation for the women's team last week. So you can read that and see kind of what the projections were in terms of who's fitting where. But yeah, I think if you're looking at her for those two, three positions, I mean, to my mind, there'd be about three positions that are pretty locked in for that team next year. Ideally, Wright, the transfer from Georgia Tech, Chit Chat, at point guard. You went out to get her because you needed a starting point guard to run the offense. So, I think that's definitely going to be her. And then, like we've just been talking, you really want Stolke and Hayden to be the 4-5 in your lineup. So then you're left with, who's at the two and the three. And, it looked like it might be Addie Deal, your star incoming freshman, and Kylie Feuerbach, I think. Feuerbach started all 34 games last year. She's back this year, grad student, tons of experience. So I think it's probably going to be that, a three-way battle for two spots there with Deal, Feuerbach, and Rodriguez. And I kind of think, I have to kind of wait and see, maybe to start the year, I think Feuerbach starts out, it begins the year as the starter because she does have all of that experience and chemistry with a lot of other players on the team. Maybe it takes Rodriguez some time to develop that, so you kind of want to bring her off the bench as a, six woman spark plug to start with. Would not shock me to see her get into the lineup by, January, February, though, if it just turns out that Iowa's best five, includes her in that role. I'm really bullish on Addie Deal for a lot of reasons. I just think, especially at a program like Iowa, I don't think you get a player like that of that caliber of a recruit and they don't start their first year. Like especially when you have a need at the position she plays. Like Iowa needs help at the guard position and they need scorers. Like, without Lucy Olson, there's a big void in terms of this backcourt scoring. Addie Deal, I mean, you don't want to put too much pressure on a true freshman, but she was a stud in high school and she looks like she'll be, I think they're going to rely on her to to score quite a bit as a freshman next year.
I don't think Jan showed this year that she is not afraid to work with a variety of lineups and figure it out through the year.
Yep.
I also don't think part of that is she's not going to be afraid to start three guards, especially
Oh
if
no.
two of them are 6 foot in
Yeah.
Kylie and how tall is Addie, by the way? She is also 6 foot. So
Yep.
um and I mean, who knows what Journey Houston's going to be, right? As a
Right.
freshman as well. And of course, man, that front court has a chance to be loaded if Layla Hayes is everything as advertised and can play in year one. Um,
Right.
so it's just, I would say the only void, if you're going to call it a void, is that Lucy Olson role. But if Deal can step in and be that, like, but also probably not be on the ball quite as much,
Yeah.
it's tough to get that role in two players, right? But projecting, you're probably hoping that that is filled by Chit Chat and Deal. Probably not Rodriguez because she just doesn't shoot the ball as well, and Feuerbach didn't shoot the ball great either. So if Deal
Right.
can step in and be a little bit more consistent from three, you get that combo. But they're both young too, so
Yep.
it's just asking a lot. But you're in a position to develop, and Jan is done a lot of development in their career.
Oh
So
yeah.
it'll be interesting. Okay, project your day one starters 1 through 5 right now. No pressure.
Day one, like I said, my day one starters, I'm gonna go with Chit Chat, right? And Deal as your one and two. I'm going with Feuerbach at the three for right now, and then Stolke and Hayden at the four and the five. Um, like I said, I just think that experience factor is the edge for Feuerbach right now. Um, but I will not be surprised that, if Rodriguez comes in, fits in like a glove with everybody else, and just really looks gangbusters in practice next fall. I would not be shocked to see her potentially starting, and for sure, I think she's going to get really good minutes to start. Like I'm expecting her to be a 15 to 20 minute player from the get-go at least.
I think if you're just getting your five best players on the court to start, right? Playing maybe a
Hmm.
little possessionless basketball, taking a little bit from Ben McCollum here.
Right.
You might go Deal, Kylie, Rodriguez, Stolke, and Hayden.
Yeah.
Because talent wise, right? Like maybe not positionally, you're not
Right.
trying if you don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole, right?
Yeah.
That could work. So
I I
I
think
would
that's
be interested by that.
yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's a lineup that we'll see in games to some extent because I do think Wright's going to be the starter at point guard, like we just said, like, that's why you brought her in, etc. She's not going to play 40 minutes though, obviously. And I was going to need a capable backup to spell her when she's out, and I could definitely see Deal filling that role. She is a combo guard, but she played a lot of point and had the ball in her hands a lot in high school. So she is, very comfortable in that role for sure.
And like my thought on that is where does Taylor Stremlo fit in, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions of this. Um, both the Wright edition and the Rodriguez edition, frankly, both transfer ads, honestly, because I do think they're gonna most likely take minutes away from Stremlo and Mulaney um, that they might have had next year. From what we saw from them this year, they were freshmen. They had good games, bad games, ups, downs, etc. Um, but the positions where you would expect them to play, I think you're definitely gonna see Wright and Rodriguez in those positions a fair amount this year, and so that's gonna eat away minutes from Stremlo and Mulaney. At least that's what it seems like right now.
Well, we shall see. That's definitely one of the, I would tab it as like a fun part of the off season, but also like one of those things that it's like, get the season here already. I want to see how it works. And the
Yep.
other point I wanted to make too is in my mind, that's probably the five best players, but you might be forcing something there. Eh, One thing that I think people, especially of my age group, but when you're in, Gen Z versus millennial, this isn't a video game, right? You can't just plug people in, have their attributes, and it works.
Yep.
So probably going to take some moving pieces with Jan to figure it out and her staff going forward. Which, speaking of her staff, going to have a former Hawkeye on it. We found out today as well. Sydney Affolter hired as graduate assistant for the Hawkeye staff going into next year. How cool is that? I mean, Ross, obviously, I mean, I was there when they were in Oklahoma for their tournament, the first two games of the tournament, and Sydney was one of the more emotional players on the team,
Hmm.
being that it was her final year, and obviously
Yep.
we all understood, and we gave her some time to to feel her feelings a little bit before we all talked to her.
Yep.
But for her to come back, I'm sure it's gonna kill her that she's not playing, but at the same time, I think it's really cool that she gets this opportunity. I think I would have liked to see her give a shot at playing in Europe a little bit, but at the same time, if this is what she sees as her best option, man, go for it. I think
Yeah.
she's got some real. I would say she's got the ability to connect and motivate people as a leader, where she might not be that front-facing, head coach type of personality, but she's got that assistant coach vibe where you feel like you can really talk to them as opposed to just you're my boss as like the head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
She's got a little bit of that, and I think having her around around her former teammates is awesome. And it's hard not to be happy for her.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I got to interact with her a few times at some post games and stuff, and she's just super nice, super genuine, and you could really see how much she cares about the university and the program and her teammates. So, I mean, yeah, it'll kill her not to be able to get out on the court and go try and grab rebounds for her teammates and everything. But this is probably like the next best thing, right? She still gets to be there in practice, see them every day, work with them, talk to them, connect with them, give her insight and everything. She really emerged as one of the top leaders on that team last year. And that we talked a little bit about the lineup next year, and that's one of the bigger questions I think heading into next season is who steps up as a leader, on court and off the court too, for to some extent. But who are the real leaders for that team next year? Because obviously they had tremendous leadership for years with Caitlin and Kate Martin, kind of the backbones of the program, and then they gave way to Sydney Affolter and Lucy Olson. Really, took her a little bit of time to kind of get comfortable in that role, I think. But certainly by the middle of the season and the last part of the season, she was a great leader for that program. So now they're replacing Affolter and Olson, and maybe yeah, I don't know. Does Sid get to try to imbue some of that leadership on some of the current players? I'm sure she'll try. But yeah, I think it's wonderful that she gets to still be part of the program, still help out. As far as her kind of forsaking a playing career, yeah, we don't know what options she may or may not have had, or what her goals are. I know she's already attended like some coaching seminars and stuff in off seasons prior, so I think coaching has definitely been kind of on her game plan for her future for a while. So obviously this is a great way to get started on that as well. So yeah, I think it's just a really a feel good move, but also one that just makes a lot of sense and can be, beneficial to the program. Not that a grad assistant is gonna, make the difference between 18 wins and 23 wins or anything like
I
that.
don't know, Ross. I don't know.
Maybe. maybe, but just whatever. It's just I think it's just really nice, really cool to have her still part of the program and in this role for sure.
And I think one thing illustrate another point that I think might get lost on some folks is it's not always easy for a player like Sydney to just instill the values or the skill set that she had on her teammates while she's also playing. Now she gets to have that as more or less her full-time role, right? So she can
Yep,
be around Tegan Mullaney, she can be around Emely Rodriguez and show some of those things why she was such a freaking good rebounder at 5'11, right?
yep.
So that's definitely a bonus for her being around and in this role too. You mentioned leadership. I got the roster in front of me, and I mean, I th this is a good question. This isn't a oh my God they have a vo it's just a good question, right? Because
Hmm.
Taylor McCabe is quiet. She's a senior.
Yeah,
Kylie Fierbach has or is going to be a grad student. She was sort of called upon during the Fever game to speak to the crowd that was there. They had the PA announcer or whatever they call it, the fan engagement person, asking her some questions. Said she was from Syracuse, Illinois. I don't know if I said that on the podcast, but that was like, okay, come on. It says Sycamore right there. But I think they might be sort of pushing Kylie into that role. That'll be it because she's definitely the most seasoned. She's been around
yep,
for the Caitlyn era and the post Caitlyn era, and she's
yep,
been part of like played significant roles in both.
yep.
So that'll
Well,
be really interesting to me too. She's another play. I mean, this roster's filled with them, but I don't know if I've shared the story on the podcast when I was coming back from Michigan State during football season, she was actually on my connecting flight to from O'Hare to Cedar Rapids. And I just talked to her a little bit, and I was just like, "Hey, I covered the team. It's not my beat, but just introduced myself and talked to her a little bit." Kylie is so nice. Like it's just one of those people that's really, really easy to talk to. And I talked to her at the
uh-huh.
tournament and stuff like that. But I'm just it's a different dynamic. I've never been on a women's sports team, so I don't know how that comes together. But it'll just be interesting to me how she fills that void, or if she's the one that fills that void. She's the one that sticks out on the roster to me anyway. Unless it's like
And
a sophomore like Taylor Stremlow, right? Like, I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's the thing is often, with that leadership question, you kind of naturally, I think, look towards the more experienced players, the upperclassmen. But I was upperclassmen this year, Taylor McCabe and Hannah Stulke, wonderful players, but their personalities are not what you would typically look for in a leadership, in the kind of that really outgoing, projecting confidence, extroverted, personality, that isn't really them at all. So yeah, I think probably Kylie gets called on for part of that, and otherwise, yeah, I think you're looking at some younger players or the transfers. I mean, they're also younger though. I mean,
right.
they're not like it's not like you're bringing in someone who's played not like Lucy Olson who played 3 years at Villanova and was a starter in All Big East. Like that's a lot of experience and a lot of equity that she's bringing with her. So yeah, it's going to be a really fascinating question, I think, and one we're not going to, really know the answer to until probably next fall when they start practicing and certainly when the games start and see how that manifests on the court.
We shall see. We shall also see, speaking of basketball, future, etc. I was at the 3SSB tournament or event in, I don't like calling them tournaments because they're not tournaments, but it's just like a round robin sort of thing. Anyway, at the 3SSB event in Council Bluffs this weekend, very different than last year with the Fran staff versus now McCollum, and it was the live period this time around. It was not the live period when I was there last time.
You want to
McCollum.
tell the podcast listeners who the first person you saw
Oh,
at the
yeah. I walked in, and the first person I saw was Fran. It was funny. Of course, he's wearing his pen polo, and he still doesn't know my name. It's been 2 years or 2.5-ish years that I was on the beat. I got a "What's up, brother?" Okay, all right. But I mean, he recognized me, so
Yeah.
talked to him a little bit and just said I was happy that he landed there, and he was
Yeah.
appreciative. Fran's always been good to me, so I have no issues. But um, yeah, very different this time around. Ben McCollum, Josh Sash were there on Saturday. Sash was there on Friday. But this staff, and I'm sure people have gathered this by way of how they operated in the portal. They are very, very patient, very, very deliberate, very, very picky. After the live period, the start of there's that date in the summer where they can start talking to the sophomores, the rising juniors.
Hmm.
I don't think that's going to be a big day for this staff either, but this staff after a live period, the previous staff would shell out offers. I don't know how many. It probably, I mean, it varied year to year, obviously. 15.
Right.
We are a day, 2 days removed from when they were there in Council Bluffs and nothing. And the dead period is coming up on Wednesday. No visitors, whether it's the portal or high school recruiting that I know of anyway. So it's really, really interesting. Really, the only players we have to go off of right now that were there at 3SSB are guys that they offered at Drake or that they
Hmm.
looked at Drake and are looking at again. They've only offered since stepping into this staff, steps taking over for the previous staff. They've only offered two guys that had not been offered by the previous staff, and that's Colin Rice and Ethan Taylor. Ethan Taylor is from Kansas. I can't remember where exactly in Kansas right now, but he plays for MoKan Elite on the EYBL circuit, 7-1 center, so or forward. So not the only school after him for sure. I think he's a
Right.
four-star on Rivals, but
Yeah.
lots and lots of patience from this group. And I will say that I absolutely understand fans getting antsy and annoyed, maybe. I would love to write more about basketball recruiting. I would love to write more about the portal.
Yep.
They're just really going to take their time. I respect it. Also, at some point, you've got to take some action.
Hmm.
I'm not because after this dead period, that's when guys arrive and can start working out. So are you going to
Yep.
enter the summer with two roster spots open, only 11 guys available? Or you're not going to roll like that into the season. You got to have 13 guys. You got to have 13 guys.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, they're still in a position of needing backcourt help. I think everybody and their mother that's watched Iowa basketball or that is a fan has seen how this roster's been constructed, thinks they need a true five. Seems like everybody but Ben McCollum thinks so. So, and he's the head coach, so
Right.
he's probably
His op
forgotten more about basketball than any of us know, right?
right. His opinion matters more than the rest of ours.
Right. And you also have to take into consideration how freaking expensive these centers are.
Hmm.
We talked about this recently, so I don't necessarily need to bring it up again, but a guy that averaged like 5 and 4 got almost $1 million. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
It's supply and demand, right?
Yep.
It's just a different world. And I also wrote about the potential rotation, potential starters coming up for this coming season. So you can check that out as well on on Rivals or on Hawkeye Beacon from myself and from Ross men's and women's teams. And then from the weekend, got a lot of intel
Hmm.
regarding what's next. There's potentially another 2025 that they might kick the tires on. I got that name for our premium subscribers, and then go down the list in terms of the portal. We learned some more. Just not a whole lot of movement at this point in time. Again, you can check that out. All of it's on our premium board. I tweeted out a link today, and that all of that intel is shared with our premium subscribers. So go ahead and check that out. Join us today at iowa.rivals.com. Uh,
Are
yeah,
you,
I mean, anything else?
yeah, I was gonna say, are you surprised to see like kind of how deliberate and patient they're being in terms of because this was a wholesale roster turnover. I mean, the only guy that is still on the last year's team from last year's team is Cooper Koch, right?
Yeah, Jacob Cook is still on the roster as far as I know. I mean, there's a
Okay,
walk-on sophomore, so
right.
um, yeah, I there were a few folks on our board who were getting antsy probably a couple weeks ago. And while I understood it and I do understand it, it's at that point in time I was like, let's slow down. They weren't in a phase of they need bodies, right? When you're saying they need bodies, are you saying that they should have kept Chris Tajo? Are you saying that they should have kept Riley Mulvey? Which there probably could be a case made for both of those guys, honestly. Maybe I picked the wrong guys at the list because you need a five. And I mean, who's to say Mulvey wouldn't have been a good filler on this stat? I think he probably could have been. And Tajo would have been a project. I don't. That's a whole nother thing. But I don't think they're in a position where if you got a pulse, they'll take you. Like they're not going to be signing me anytime soon.
No.
And I don't think they need to be a 29-year-old white guy who didn't play varsity at OABCIG high school. I don't think they need me. But
And
now
they're
getting
not going down to the rec center to get guys either, anything like that for sure. But
now it's getting to a point where I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? What's going on?
yeah,
And part of it is behind the scenes stuff that again we shared with our premium subscribers. Some of it's a little confusing to me because there appear to be guys that they could get, maybe should get, and they haven't done anything. There's also guys in the portal that, even some folks on our premium board have suggested where it's like, why don't they go after them? And I mean, maybe there's
right,
connections and stuff. They don't see him as a fit. I don't know. I mean, we can give you all the intel we get, and
right.
sometimes it just doesn't come together. So, we're still watching. We're still seeing how it all transpires and comes together. So stay with us at iowa.rivals.com and follow along because we're going to be learning more. We're going to be paying attention like crazy. I'm going to be out and talking to people and we'll share that information as we get it. So stay with us over there at iowa.rivals.com. Don't forget to check out that content that Ross and I mentioned today. Plenty of stuff there, and we're gonna have more podcasts through the summer. We're gonna get you through the summer without Hawkeye sports. Iowa
Yep,
baseball still going on though. Ross, you just wrote
still
about it.
alive.
Tell us about what's going on.
Yeah, so they are headed to the Big Ten tournament this week, which is down in Omaha. New format for the tournament. It's 12 teams now. It used to be 8 teams. They did a double elimination thing. Now they have like a pool play thing for the first couple days. There's like 4 groups with 3 teams each. And the winner of each group goes on, and then it's kind of a standard single elimination, semis and final. Iowa ended up with the third seed. They finished third. They came into the weekend actually leading the Big Ten, which is where they've been most of the season. Had a rough go to end the season. Were the schedule ended up being kind of backloaded. They played a lot of good teams in May. Oregon, who ended up being one of the co-champions of the league. That's who Iowa played this past weekend in Iowa City. The Ducks swept all 3 from the Hawkeyes, unfortunately. They played Washington about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Huskies took 2 or 3 from Iowa. So they did really well in the Big Ten, through the first couple months of the season, and then kind of stumbled down the stretch, and that's how they kind of wound up with that third seed. Unfortunately, their RPI is not great. Some non-conference scheduling and a few tough losses kind of put them in a not great position there. So they probably need to win the Big Ten tournament if they're going to make the NCAA tournament this year. So that would mean winning 4 games, probably their 2 pool play games, and then the semi, and then the final. Which they have some really good pitching. They've had some really timely hitting for a lot of the season. So if they can kind of recapture that form they had in March and April, they could have a chance. But they're also probably going to have to go through those West Coast teams the Big Ten added. They've been up and down in other sports, but they were really good in baseball. Oregon and UCLA came in and they're the co-champions this year. first time in the league, already, co-champions. USC, I think, finished fourth, and Washington was like, I don't know, fifth, sixth, somewhere around there. So like the West Coast teams came in and really established themselves pretty strongly in the Big Ten, which they did in softball as well, and a few other sports like that. So
It is definitely different with these teams that have better weather and
yes,
better resources.
yes.
I shared on my Twitter page when I went and covered the Iowa versus Oregon State game on Saturday in Des Moines that it was my first time covering a baseball game since I was doing the Waterloo Bucks play-by-play in 2021.
Okay.
And they had a shortstop on that team, Josh Kasevich from Oregon. And if
Hmm.
he was any example of how good Oregon can be, they were pretty freaking good. I wasn't able to watch it obviously because I was covering the 3SSB event, but Kasevich, I think somebody looked it up when we were in there and said that he's now part of the Blue Jays organization playing farm league ball. I don't know what if he's double, triple, single A, any of that, but um,
Yep.
yeah. So I have a rough idea of what we're getting at here. It's just definitely not my beat. So we will
Yep.
obviously pay attention to see how things transpire
Yep.
for them as the postseason rolls along. Again, stay tuned with us here at iowa.rivals.com for that. We should have some updates regarding that merger here in the next 5 to 10 days, is what we've been told. And again, Ross and I will keep y'all posted on
Yep.
that front as well. So,
Yep. The On3 merger.
yes, yeah, exactly. And we would tell you more now if we knew more, but we don't. So here we
Yep.
go.
You know
Follow
what we
along
know.
with us yeah, here on iowa.rivals.com. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment. Who's your starters? I always forget to ask the questions when we're in the middle of the pod. Who are your starters for men's basketball, women's basketball? How do things shake out there with both of those teams? Let us know down there in the comments on YouTube. Drop a like, drop a comment, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. Leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We appreciate it and it helps us out a lot. So once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter or X, joined by Ross Binder. And for now, we will see you next time.